my dear friend and our new member, Gord Anderson with IWF. Gord?
Thanks, Catherine, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gord Anderson, and I'm one of the founding principals of Indigenous Wealth Finance. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I have 8 minutes, so I'm going to go fairly quickly. Our mission as an organization, IWF, is twofold. One is to resolve all the outstanding claims that are owed to First Nations in Canada. So if you think of treaties 1 through 11, all those communities are actually, there is a legal obligation on behalf of the federal government to resolve these claims going back to the start of the treaties, annuity claims, cows and plows, treaty land entitlement claims. And our role is to put together the financing so the communities don't have to come up with the money themselves, to resolve all the money that is owing to them so that they can move towards self-governance and independence. That's the first mission. And once the communities have received the funds and the governance is in place, then the second key mission is equally important, if not more important, and that is effectively partnering First Nations with corporate Canada. And that's where I want to spend a few minutes this afternoon on. But before I do that, my background very quickly is I first started in the Indigenous space with CIBC, where we launched the Aboriginal business banking in Alberta and the Northwest Territories back in 1995, and ran a trust company nationally where the focus was primarily on Indigenous communities. My partner is actually here, Rob Metz. I'll get him to do a little wave. There he is, hiding in the corner. He said in about 2 minutes he's going to hide under the table because I'm talking. But Rob has spent 30 years with Indigenous communities, primarily resolving claims, doing all the research on the treaty land claims, doing all the work on the annuities, negotiating that with the federal government. But one of the more recent projects was basically partnering corporate Canada with Indigenous communities. So he was on the lead negotiations with Enbridge, putting the 36 communities together on that deal that achieved the first national government, federal government support. He was also on the Coastal GasLink deal with the original 17 communities, and then now 6 communities where IWF is actually the general partner representing those 6 communities in negotiation on ownership in Coastal GasLink. Additional ownership, those 6 communities are putting their own equity in to that project. They don't even need the government guarantee, which is phenomenal. My other partner is not here today. He's on a flight to Ottawa, Ian Matheson. And Ian was the former head of Aon Canada in terms of their Indigenous insurance business nationally, where they were actually a lead in the corporate insurance side, as well as their global risk management strategies. And he was on the negotiating committee with the Alberta government 10 years ago on how we can protect our industries, energy, mining, forestry, agriculture, et cetera, that are being challenged not just in financial markets with lending, but probably more importantly in insurance markets in terms of getting capacity. If you can't get insurance, forget about getting a loan, forget about being in business. So how do we do that? We build an industry in Alberta that is insurance and reinsurance and retrocession. So the Captive Insurance Act, Ian helped draft the legislation. And the most important piece of that is, from my perspective and our perspective at IWF, is it allows a company like an Enbridge or a number of companies in this room to literally set up not just a subsidiary, but even better, probably an LPGP structure, where the First Nation is the LP investor and owner, and let's say the pipeline company is the GP. And with that structure, there are tremendous benefits for the corporation that they can share, and they achieve equity ownership with the First Nations. So not just selling assets, but also setting up risk management structures. So these are the 5 structures we do. And I mentioned the claims. There's probably 180 claims and communities with claims in Western Canada that are still outstanding. Imagine if we get that money in those communities, set them up with proper governance, how they will be able to set up their own governance and separate that from Chief and Council and Economic Development and do projects with Corporate Canada. So that leads me to the second one, which is a structure for partnering with Corporate Canada. So instead of doing a typical financing vehicle, do a lease. Take an asset on the balance sheet, sell it to a First Nation, and lease it back. You have the control of that asset as the GP, but your partner is the Indigenous community. They have ownership. The security for the lender is the same, but it's a lease instead of a loan. What does that mean? Accelerate depreciation over the 5-year term of the lease and deduct the full lease cost, not just the interest cost. So it works really well for the company, and they share those economic benefits with their new partner and equity owner, the First Nation. Captive insurance, I dived into that a little bit on my introduction of Ian Matheson. Since the regulations came out 3 years ago in Alberta, the Captive Insurance Act and the regulations, 37 companies have domiciled in Alberta to set up their risk management structures. They used to have to go to the Caribbean, Bermuda and Barbados, where I spent about 10 years running a captive insurance business. With RBC, that's a small company, you wouldn't have heard of them. But it's a great opportunity for Alberta to help our companies better manage their risk in partnership with First Nations. We're also helping set up what will be the first national Indigenous-owned insurance company. I mentioned Ian Matheson managed that business for Aon nationally, but imagine an Indigenous-owned insurance company providing insurance services for Indigenous businesses owned by Indigenous, benefits a profitable company, dividends going back to the community. That's what we're doing. So we're working on that. So if any deputy ministers have any ideas around that, come speak to me. And then finally, what do we need in Canada to do all these infrastructure? We need inbound investment for any project significant. We're often not looked at as an attractive place to invest. But what if you invested through a limited partner, and that limited partner was a First Nation, and there weren't friction costs to that? There weren't withholding taxes that would normally apply to money going back out on that project or on that investment. So debt coming into Canada can be structured a lot more effectively with that type of structure than traditional methods. So I'm at 7 minutes and 14 seconds, and I was given 8 minutes. So I'm going to basically say, thank you very much. Our whole mandate is around helping Canada, not just having the Indigenous world and the non-Indigenous world, but bringing those worlds together for the benefit of Canada. Thank you.